0, jetzt. Okay, hallo, willkommen again. Welcome everybody, willkommen, moin moin, as we say in Hamburg, where I am from. And also our guest has lived for most of her time. My name is Oliver Gorf. I am the new director of Goethe-Zentrum Atlanta, and I'm very pleased to meet all of you today on this beautiful afternoon, an diesem schönen Nachmittag. Before we come to our guest, or actually we have two guests even, little surprise here. I would like to introduce the Goethe-Zentrum quickly. If you don't know, Goethe-Zentrum Atlanta is located in Midtown Atlanta. Currently, everything is online though. We are having a language program and we're having, like now, a cultural program that we offer to the whole of Southeast of America. So not only Atlanta or Georgia, but also Florida, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Alabama. That's that. So we are here to promote German-speaking language, obviously, but also culture to everyone and to help fostering the relations between America and the German-speaking countries. In that context, we offer a lot of services that you can look up at german-institute.org. And by the way, if you don't know what to give your parents, your children, your loved ones in general, we gift certificates available. Hint, hint. Okay, that was that. This is today a very special day for me. It's the 5th episode of Mach, kein, about German theater, which I am doing because I have a background in theater as well as in language teaching. I used to work in theater in Hamburg, and somebody else who used to work in Hamburg theater, but really now is a national theater and international theater, and not only theater, but also in literature in general, is my guest. Please welcome Nino Haratischvili. Hello, Nino.
Hello.
Nino is currently actually again in Hamburg, which is very fitting because that's where we met as well. But Nino lives also in Berlin meanwhile. Nino, the first question is always, how are you doing? Wie geht es dir?
Ich muss kurz nachfragen, sollen wir auf Deutsch oder Englisch?
We can do a little bit of English and then you can switch into German as well and I translate whenever you like.
Hi, good evening, good afternoon. I mean, here it's it's late, and I'm really pleased to meet you that way. And it's been a while since we met last time, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm doing quite fine. It's okay. I moved to Berlin 3 months ago, and it's still interesting and yeah, different, completely different than Hamburg. And but of course, due to Corona, everything is a little bit challenging, and I guess it's like the same, like everywhere. And of course, I'm a little missing my friends and missing culture and missing a lot of, yeah, of course, theater and so on. So, but I mean, we're dealing with that and it's fine. It's okay. And yeah, trying to get used to the new city but now I am visiting some friends for the weekend. So I got back to Hamburg.
Yeah.
And leaving tomorrow for Berlin.
Yeah. Before I introduce you, just a follow-up question. Does the COVID situation somehow affect you as a writer in your profession as an author? Does it have any impact on you already, or do you think it will have?
Of course it had, because I mean, a lot of appointments, a lot of everything, my whole schedule for the last year, and all the to 21, it is impacted, of course. I had a lot of readings, some theater jobs. I had the opportunity to go to Italy and Spain, where my book's been published, and everything as found or cancelled. Of course, it's a completely new situation, but still, I think there's some more professions that are dealing much more. It's more difficult for them to deal with the situation, because still, I think books are selling, people are reading still, and maybe I'm a little bit more lucky than people from like other professions, but still it's challenging. I mean, it didn't change. Of course, my profession, just like sitting on a table and writing. Of course, I'm more used to that sitting at home situation, not as challenging, but I also have 2 small kids, and of course it's really, really difficult. And the situation of sitting at home all the time, it's also not really
yeah. Yeah, I think we can all relate. That's the interesting thing for me, or one of the interesting things about this pandemic. We're all experiencing the same problems. The way we react on them, especially our countries and so on, might be different, but pretty different sometimes. But it's still the same problem for everyone. Okay, thank you. Before I continue, 1 or 2 people here in this Zoom meeting have their microphone still on. If you could mute yourself, then we don't hear you and can focus on each other. Now let me make a little bit more of a thorough introduction of Nino. Nino was actually born in Tbilisi, or in Georgia, but not in Georgia where most of you guys live, but in the Georgia in Europe, in the country that used to belong to the Soviet Union when there still was a Soviet Union, to make it clearer. And that has a big effect, as we will see on your writing as well. She moved to Germany and to Hamburg in her teens. She went also to a German school, or a German immersive school in Georgia, not USA, and then lived from her teens on. From which age on in Germany? When exactly did you move to Germany? How old were you?
First time I came to Germany when I was 12, because my mother moved to Germany because of her job. But I went back when I was just like 2 years later. Yeah. And I came back to Germany to stay here when I was 20 to study, and said it was in Hamburg.
Okay.
It was 2000.
And Georgia in German is Georgien. That's in the chat, by the way. Georgien. Also, Nino kommt aus Georgien, aber ist eine deutsche Autorin. She's the author of, I want to say, dozens of theater plays. Dozens is probably the right word. You have an enormous output and high quality output on top of it, which really drives me crazy, because I'm trying to write as well. I'm a playwright. I don't know how you do it, but it's really amazing. Those theater plays are played nationally, but also internationally on the stages. She's also a theater director, and also nationally, and she is the author of 4 very well-received novels that made her a fixture, really a fixture in the German literature scene. That's kind of the input. But before we want to talk today about your art in theater, but then of course also about your novels, especially because one of your novels was just published in the United States of America, so in English. So that is interesting for our audience, I assume. Before we talk about that, let me tell you, the audience, briefly how I got aware of you, and then how we met. So how I got aware of you was very interesting, actually. And you don't know that either. So that must have been in 2007, actually.
I'm curious.
Yeah. I'm kind of, I came into the theater scene kind of late. You were much younger than me, and I came in late. And in 2007, I made for Lichthof Theater. I directed a Medea version in a bar in Hamburg. So not on the theater stage, but in a bar, in a small bar in Familieneck. And it was actually called the version that I wrote of Medea. Medea is, as you know, an old Greek, or you can talk more about it maybe, play that I tried to fuse with a topic about gentrification really in Germany. It's very complicated to explain, but basically it took place in a bar. And a few houses away from that bar was another theater, the Monsoon Theater. And then while we were doing very many shows in that bar of Familieneck, which was Medea, people came in because they saw the theater people. Is this where Nino's play takes place? So who's Nino? Nino Haratischvili. And it's in Monsoon Theater. So no, that's down the way. So that happened several times. So that was the first time I got aware of Nino Haratischvili. You were still a student, actually, at the Theater Academy. And you had a play going on there. And people came to my play to actually wanted to go to the other play. So, and you could already tell you have some gravity. People want to see what you're doing. That was pretty obvious already. Right after that Medea part, I went with the artistic director and founder of Lichthof Theater actually to see, funny enough, your version of Medea at Kampnagel. That was your final exam basically as a theater director at Kampnagel, which is a big stage, experimental stage, if you will, in Hamburg. But not only you directed that play, you had also written your own version of Medea. And that was called, I'm going to share this. Once in a while, I'm going to share something. Mein und dein Herz. Is that correct? Mein und dein Herz? Medea. And we saw this, that's not the one, 1 second. And we saw this play, dieses Theaterstück, and we saw it and said, we want Mein und dein Herz Medea. And we said, we would like to have this director on our stage. Because I, at that time, was also the communications director already of the theater. And this is how I became aware of you. And then it actually happened, and you made a one-off play at our stage, and then a few others. But first of all, and that's why I'm telling the whole thing, because it makes aware the audience. You had some gravity. People want to see what you're doing. You have an interesting theme. And Mein und dein Herz, for me, is already interesting that you chose this topic. It's very educative about, I think, at least about your theater, kind of theater that you're writing. Could you tell us a little bit about Mein und dein Herz, Medea, why you chose this old myth, basically, and what interested you in that? Is that possible? Short words? You can say it in German if that's easier.
Yes, of course. I mean, ja, ich kann es gern auch auf Deutsch erzählen. Spannend, ich wusste das nicht. Ich wusste, dass du eine Medea in einer Bar inszeniert hast, aber das ist mir neu. Mein und dein Herz, ja, also ich komme ja aus Georgien, wie du es bereits gesagt hast. Und ist ein Kolchis, wo ursprünglich die mythologische Gestalt der Medea herkommt, ist das heutige Georgien. Und dadurch war dieser Mythos Art Nationalmythos auch, wobei die Georgier eine ganz andere Auffassung des Mythos haben als die Griechen. Einfach seit ich denken konnte, war diese Figur irgendwie da. Und ich habe, glaube ich, aber in meinem Studium in den 4 Jahren in Hamburg sehr großen Bogen um Georgien gemacht. Das hat sich dann verändert, als ich am Lichthof, das war mein erstes sozusagen irgendwie Commitment oder irgendwie eine Form von mich wieder diesem Georgien-Thema ausliefern, auch dank damals der damaligen Theaterleiterin Marien Stucken, die mich dazu sehr animiert hat. Aber ich habe in meinem Studium, weil es auch irgendwie, ich wollte nicht als diese ewige Migrantin und dieses ganze Georgien-Thema immer dauerpräsent haben, und ich habe mich 3 Jahre davor überhaupt nicht mit Georgien beschäftigt. Und bei meinem Diplom, weil es etwas sehr war für mich damals, war irgendwie klar, okay, ich mache so ein bisschen back to the roots. Also ich muss dann halt zurückgehen zu dem Ort, wo ich herkomme. Und dann war das naheliegend, dass ich mich halt mit Medea als Thema beschäftige. Und mich hat auch natürlich das Thema der Liebe oder dieser bedienungslosen Liebe beschäftigt, der Auslegung der Legende und des Mythos, was, wie gesagt, sehr unterschiedlich ist in Deutschland und in Europa oder zum Beispiel in Georgien, aber auch die griechische Variante. Und dann habe ich mich beschlossen, mich an diesem Stoff sehr abzuarbeiten und eine eigene Version daraus zu machen. Und mit dem Fokus auf die mir erschien. Und so ist letztlich dieser Text entstanden. Ja.
I'm going to translate that a little
es
bit.
war eine Art.
I'm going to translate this shortly, and then you can tell us our focus, so to speak. So I make it a bit short. I hope I don't miss anything, but basically, so Medea was the final exam, if you will, or however you call it in English, actually, of your time at the Theater Academy in Hamburg, and you had kind of, you had not wanted to really approach the topic of Georgian before, during those 4 years of academy, because and why? No, there's no real need for it, maybe, or but then with then you decided to approach it. And the interesting thing is that the Medea myth is actually based in Kolchos, which is a part of Georgian. And the interpretation of the myth of Medea is also different in different countries, and definitely in Georgian. Just a general story. The story is, it's a very famous story. It's like one of those basic story myths for European culture, really, is Medea meets Jason, a prince, and there are different versions, but basically they leave the country. She leaves the country and leaves her family, and then is basically alone in his country, and he cheats on her, and her revenge is that she kills their mutual children as revenge. That's kind of the short story of it. But as I said, there are different interpretations and different narratives around this. And you chose this to talk not only about this Kolchis region as a example for this different place, but also to talk about love and about these different interpretations. And what was your actual focus then in that version of Medea? What did you write into this myth, basically?
Ich glaube, also zum Beispiel, ich fand es spannend, weil beim Seneca zum Beispiel, es gibt sehr viele Bearbeitungen von Medea, unter anderem von zum Beispiel Seneca. Und da wird das goldene Vlies als eine Art quasi, ja, vereinfacht gesagt, Goldgewinnungsrezept dargestellt. Also das, dieses Fell, womit man halt Gold aus diesen Goldgruben sozusagen nimmt. Und ich fand das einfach sehr spannend, das als so eine Art kapitalistisches Motiv irgendwie zu verstehen, zum einen. Und das versus einer nationalen Welt. Also das heißt, die Symbolik, die Medea damit verbindet, also was für sie das goldene Vlies ist, ist nicht das, was es für die Griechen ist und nicht das, was Jason, weswegen Jason in die Kolchis kommt, um das zu holen. Das Materielle versus Emotionale, wenn man so will. Und natürlich auch diese, ich glaube, mein Thema war waren, ja, als was sie oft ja auch dargestellt wird in der westlichen Auffassung, weil ich nun mal selber mich da auch natürlich sehr stark interessiert, das Thema der Migration und des Andersseins und des Woandersherkommens und des Fremdseins und dass einfach Dinge in der Fremde natürlich komplett eine andere Konnotation bekommen, als es das. Und da fand ich dieses Bild von diesem goldenen Vlies einfach ein wahnsinnig treffend, weil es sehr oft diese migrantische Situation, wenn man das ist das eine. Und das andere, ich glaube, dass ich mich sehr stark auch mit dem Thema der Liebe oder dieser Beziehung zwischen Mann und Frau damals auseinandergesetzt habe. Ich denke, das waren diese zwei, auf denen für mich dann diese Interpretation basierte.
So Nino's focus, for those who couldn't follow, Nino's focus was then on the metaphor, if you will, or the symbol of the golden fleece. That's sort of a fur or something that is kind of the maximum of wealth for some. And that's exactly the question. Is it a symbol or something for wealth or for something else? Nino, help me there a little bit. So the motivation.
It's a kind of capitalistic symbol. So that is what's interesting for me. There are a lot of interpretations of that symbol, but one of them, for example, Seneca had this version that it's like, you know, the Greeks are coming for that, I don't know the English word of goldene Vlies, but they're looking for something else, and it means for the native ones, for people from the Caucasus. So this is this capitalistic, materialistic, even version of something that is like for other people, it has an emotional or maybe even religious value. I found it interesting because, of course, as a migrant, things become completely different for me when you change your location. So things that are kind of natural, normal from in your origin country become completely strange and different for people when you change this location, when you go, in my case, when I went to Germany. So that was something that was, of course, personal to me, this issue, this topic. So that's why I guess I choose this myth, because there are a lot of versions of tell the story.
Yeah. Thank you for that explanation in English as well. Maybe we stick to English for a
while. Oliver, I can explain the golden fleece to Americans maybe later.
We're coming to your Q&A, then let's go ahead then. Okay. I chose this Medea part because that's what I think as well. It's a lot of your work is about being in two worlds, I guess, or being in strange worlds that you don't know, and how you are seen there and how you get along with that one. Can you talk a little bit, and I'm gonna stop the sharing for a little bit, and can everybody turn off their camera for now, except for Nino, of course? Then it's an easier image. Thank you. When you write a play, how do you approach writing for theater? And why actually theater? Maybe that's the first question. Why theater? Since you write in different media, so how do you decide what's for theater, and what does interest you in theater more than in anything else?
I grew up in Georgia, as you already mentioned. I grew up was really difficult and challenging in because it was just like the post-Soviet period, and we had economical and social problems, and the society, as it's been in the Soviet Union, it fell apart, and also a lot of values been changing. We had like two civil wars, and it was a really difficult time for growing up, and culturally for someone in her teens it was not really easy. So I run a theater group at school because we had like a German focused school and a lot of native speakers. They knew I was writing because I started writing when I was 14 or 15. But of course, I mean, it was just like really childish, and I was experimenting a lot and trying out because I've been always a reader and I loved books, and it was like, because there were not so many opportunities for a teen to, I mean, net, and for a long while not even electricity, and really heavy problems. And suggested that because they had a kind of school exchange, and a theater group from a school from Bremen, Germany, was visiting Tbilisi, and it was like 2098 2000 maybe, and they suggested, oh Nino, you're writing, maybe you could also write a play and maybe we could stage it, so we have kind of exchange. And I mean, I was 16 or 15. Of course, I had no idea of theater. Of course, I've been sometimes to theater, but I had no idea. But somehow it was a challenge, and I found it interesting, and I tried it out. And in Germany, the Blut geleckt, I fell in love with this medium, with this issue, because I found out that it was quite great feelings that I wrote something down on a paper, and there was made it kind of alive. So all these words and everything that I fantasized before when I was sitting alone in my chamber, it became kind of, it was like, okay, it becomes alive. There are people and they're speaking. And of course, it was really, I mean, we had no money and everything was improvised, and we took some and some, I don't know, tables and chairs from our homes and staged this place. And then we've been invited like 1 year later to Germany, so I will continue. And at that while, I started to, because I really fell in love with theater, and I started to go like and watching a lot of plays and reading. I started reading, so I was kind of really excited about it, and I wanted to find out how it works. And because of course I had like, it was just like, okay, I tried it out. And then after some years, we continued this group, the theater group, and it ran, and we had some shows. But at some point, I realized, okay, tried it out as good as I could, but now I have to learn something. I mean, I need some craftsmanship. I don't know if you can say it this way in English. Mm-hmm. There's a theater school in Georgia, but for that year they didn't have a theater group, but they had some film class. And so really interested in films, and I tried I had some, yes, I went to the Prüfung, exams, and ended up as a film director. But after 3 years, I realized that I was kind of more person, and I was trying to find a way to go back to the theater, because the theater group, it was kind of, yeah, I felt, okay, I have to finish it. Yeah, I'm kind of repeating myself, and I need to learn more to stage play, to find my way of telling stories as a director. And then I ended up in Hamburg, yes, in the theater academy. So that was my way. I mean, I started with literature, came to the theater, and after theater I went back to the prose, and somehow, but one part of me is always staying in theater, because this is something that I really, really love. And writing and directing, of course, are also completely different things, because writing, you do it like on your own, by yourself. You're alone. You have to trust yourself. You have to trust your fantasy, all your doubts, all your fears. You're doing like, okay, it's only you. But theater is a group work. I mean, you know it. You cannot do anything by your own. It's always like a teamwork. And this is what I really love about it, and what I really do miss when I'm only writing for a while. So I'm always realizing, oh, I would like to go to theater. This writing is kind of too lonely, and you always just, sometimes I'm also just bored by myself, and sometimes I want some argues and discussions and all the stuff that it's also part of theater.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like opposites, no? Writing and working as a director. you tell a story with both art forms, but really, other than that, it's really like two different poles. I remember also during the time that you worked then a little bit for our theater, but of course you worked everywhere else. You were very productive, and you made a name of yourself very, very quickly. But one of the occasions at a Q&A, you had a discussion or something with an actress that is pretty, some in the audience might know, Nicole Hesters, who amongst other things, she played a Tatort detective, I think, but very interesting person. And I remember in that discussion, you talked about something that you didn't like so much about the way German theater in general, or maybe even German literature, I don't know, was in the way that German theater, what was hip, so to speak, in German theater at that time, as opposed to the way you like to write. And we talked about this shortly before. So what I remember is that you mentioned that was still in the beginnings that people said your stories are very full and very full of emotions. Like you said, it's a lot about emotions and so on. And you took it as a compliment. I remember that in your earliest, but it turned out it was supposed to be criticism. I think since this is a theater series about German theater, that speaks to something that is maybe very unique in German in parts of German theater, that actually emotions and the fullness of life and everything is not always to present that is not always considered the right thing to do on stage, so to speak. Whereas you, maybe because you come from the literature, as you said, have a little bit of a different approach there. Could before we come to some content, what you were actually writing, no worries, could you explain a little bit what that difference is, and if that still is a difference, or if that has, if the theater has is moving towards more and more towards your direction since you're so successful anyway. Or is that a question that doesn't make sense to you, maybe?
Yeah, it is. It was a big issue while I was studying, because when I came to Germany, the first 2 years I had a feeling that everything that I know and everything that I am and everything and I'm writing is kind of wrong. Because, maybe of course I was quite young and I was also maybe a little bit naive, but the problem was that the approaching of how people were dealing here with emotions is completely different than where I come from. In my opinion, they're longing for it. I never met a reader or someone from the audience who is going to say, "Don't give me emotions, give me only like intellectual stuff." But somehow, I mean, everyone who is seeing himself or herself as an intellectual is kind of a little bit ashamed of this emotions, because it's like in Germany, the point of view is that, okay, just like this ratio thing and this emotional thing, it's like a conflict in between. For me, I cannot really understand it because it's strange to me. Everything is like you have this both parts of you, and I'm a fan of, as a reader or also as when I'm sitting in the audience in theater, I always want to be touched and kind of moved. This is something that I really love about art, and I don't want to be challenged only like by intellectual things. But in Germany, it's difficult. But somehow, what is really would do the same, it would never work. Everyone would just like keep repeating, "No, it's not possible," and it's like kitsch, and so on. So this is something that I was really dealing a lot of, it took a lot of time in my life to find a way to say, okay, I can understand, but this is not my way, and I'm still going to continue doing things how I do. Because of course I had some doubts and I had some fears and I didn't know. Because in the beginning I thought, okay, I'm going to study there for 4 years and then I'm going to go back to Georgia. I don't know if I belong here and I can belong to kind of German theater or art, or I can find my place here. Yes, it was a big process. And I remember this, what I mentioned to Nicole, that days you were just like reckoning now. The problem was that I had this, it was a professor of mine told me, you're kind of too emotional, but what you're doing, maybe you have to be like more ironic and more this deconstruction thing, and more like your concentration has to be like more on the form doing and not only just like the story. And I thought, okay, it's a compliment, it's great. Oh, it's emotional, so I'm touching people, great. But he was criticizing me, and it took me a while to find my way to deal with things like that. And in theater, yes, sometimes I'm kind of bored by that, because like for 15 years, it's like always about the form, but people are longing. I mean, the audience is longing for stories, for people from like with flesh and blood, and someone who you can identify with. So this is something that I think this is a gap between this or readers who are coming to theater. I don't want to make art for art. I don't want to write something or stage something that can only be understood by people who read like tons of books. I think this is the wrong approach. it. So I think even someone who is coming to theater for the first time and sees something has to have a chance to be touched or catched by what he or her is saying on stage. So this is something I'm trying to every time. And maybe this is the main conflict I sometimes have with German theater. But now, like 15, 16 years after, I think that people are, even theater people are more like trying to find a way back to the roots, because you always need a story. And maybe it's people become more aware of that it's not automatically something terrible when you have a well-made play. It's not like you know, or like yeah, minderwertig. I don't know what's the English word for it.
Lower quality, I guess.
So I'm interested. So I'm really curious how it's going to develop in the next 4 or 5 years. Because now they started, and I'm even a little bit angry about it. They started to stage like novels, because they're telling, you know, the modern plays, they're not enough full of life, or they have not the depth we need. So now we start to stage novels, and I mean, often, okay, sometimes it works. Most of the cases, it doesn't work. For me, it doesn't work because it's a completely different medium. And I'm getting mad, because of course the playwrights tried to write things that they thought, okay, the market is like, they need this kind of construction and this form stuff. So they tried to write things that they thought they could sell it like in a better way. And now the theaters or the critics are telling, so no, it's not enough and it's not satisfying us. So we need something like with more Welthaltigkeit. I'm really allergic about this word. So yeah, this is a big issue. Could talk about it for like hours.
Yeah, it's interesting because 2 of your novels were also turned into plays, as far as I know. So, do you think it worked there?
Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, it's difficult to talk in an
that's true
way about something. I mean, my books, of course, it's difficult, but in that case, I think it worked because Jette Steckel, the director of the plays, is a friend of mine, really well, and we studied together, and we know each other for like 17 years, and we traveled together a lot, and she also visited me in Georgia and so on. But the first idea of staging The Eight Life, the book that is being into English, it was a crazy idea, and it was not my idea and not even her idea. It was the dramaturg Julia Lochte at Thalia Theater in Hamburg, and she suggested it to both of us, and we've been just like really skeptical about it, and we were not sure if it could work, but somehow she forced us to find a way, and I'm really, really thankful, because I trusted her absolutely, and I knew that she would find a way to stay to that book maybe, and still I knew she needs this freedom to find her form or make something new out of it, because you cannot stage the book on the theater in a theater and that it's going to be the same as when you read it. Of course, you have to find something completely new, and still you have to tell the story. So this is a quite challenging thing, but in that case, I really appreciate that. Of course, they had great actors, and this was something really, really important. And the second thing is they went back to. I mean, they had it's like kind of research with the whole team, the whole artistic team. They went to Tbilisi and lot of people, and I mean, that are important in that book. So I think, yes, somehow, I don't know how, and it was a big challenge, because I mean the book is in German like more than 2,200 pages, and the play was more than 5 hours, and nobody knew if and people would want to see something like that. And I mean, it's a book about Georgia. Going back with something from another part of my life, my Hamburg life, and taking it and going back to my home country. And I remember that I was really excited and really, really emotional about this performance.
Yeah, it was I mean, I was not fortunate enough to see it because I was in Miami already, long time. I tried to see it once, but I didn't make it to Hamburg in time for before the summer break, actually. But since we are there, so this is a trailer for that staging of your novel. But really, we want to talk about. We're gonna skip now a little bit from your work on theater into the work as a novelist. And since we were talking about it, I would like to play you 2 trailers from Das achte Leben für Brilka. That's the novel and that was made into a play as well. At one of the biggest and most important, 2 actually, Deutsches Theater Berlin as well, 2 of the most important theaters really in Germany, and that made it onto other stages as well. And I want to show the audience 2 trailers, one from Thalia Theater in Hamburg, so the big one, and then another one because the other one shows more of the language that you give. And after that, we're going to talk more about The Eighth Life, Das achte Leben, because it is now available in America. And we have a special guest who's going to be introduced after that. Maybe I should say before that it's incredible. This novel, or Das achte Leben, spans over the course of more than a century, but really from 1900, basically, if I'm not mistaken, to 2006 or so, and describes the family story. Story of a family from Georgien, from before the First World War down to through the Soviet times and all its with Stalin being from Georgian, and then on to the end of the Soviet times, into the modern times, through several generations. And basically the narrator is the narrator tells us the story of all the generations through the examples of some of their lives. And I'm going to show you now the trailer, and then we're going to talk more about it.
Let's keep smiling. Let's keep laughing. Let's be happy. Ho, 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 ha. Let's keep smiling. Let's keep laughing. Let's be happy. Ho, 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 ha.
So there was one, and now a little bit of language in there. Nino, we can already see on that it covers a lot of very different lives, and that is something that I always and really very different biographies. That is something I always liked about your work, even in the early stages when we worked together, but even later and so on. You have a very good understanding, I think, of the human condition and of the different psychologies. I really admire that. That is really, I think, one of your great strengths, and it also plays out in the novel, Das achte Leben, or the eighth life. But at the same time, this novel is very much about, so we meet very individual characters. At the same time, we meet a family, and we meet history, world history, really. A very laser focus, basically. When you started writing that novel, did you know what you put yourself into, and how was the writing process of this very, very well received, best-selling, award-winning novel? How was your process there, and did you expect it to be more than 1,000-page book?
No, I had completely no idea. It was good so, because if I had an idea what I was expected to, to research and discover and struggle with, I would put down my pen, just like in the beginning. I started to, in the beginning, I wanted to write a family and focus on the 80s and 90s, the times that I grew up. I was born, and as I mentioned, being really, really challenging for Georgian, like every Georgian family, with economical, social crisis and values struggling and a lot of violence and kind of really a battle for surviving. And but one thing that I was really, that was maybe the biggest motivation, was that one day I realized that I know the history of the 20th century from the German point of view, kind of much better than from the Georgian one. For example, I read a lot of more about the Nazis and so on than about communism, for example. And I was wondering how it can be and how it's possible. Of course, I grew up with all the myths, and of course also my family had this Gulag stories and so on. But still, this kind of analyze, this general analyze, like as a society, as the Germans had to do maybe after the Second Holocaust, it never happened in the post-Soviet countries, and of course also in Georgia. So I had a lot of questions, and maybe that was the main issue, a really selfish process that I wanted to find and I started digging. I started to read books and watch movies, but I wanted to focus on this 80s and 90s. But then I realized that it was like an ending of something, ending of an epoch, ending of a historic era. And I knew, of course, I was writing it in German, and I knew first of all, okay, Western readers have to read it. And I realized, okay, it's completely not possible to understand it. Who is and why and so on. So I have to travel like back in time and go much farther, like then I ended up in 70s, 60s, and so on. And then it was like, I ended up at the October Revolution. And then I kind of, I become fearful, and I thought, okay, oh my God, this is years and how I'm going to manage it. But I was really thrilled, and I was so like a labyrinth, or maybe like a house. I'm always comparing with a house with a lot of doors and a lot of windows. And every time when I thought, okay, I opened up every room, there was like coming more and more and more. So it's not enough to read books. I have to meet people, I have to go to the archives, I have to do as much research as possible. But at that point, I was like already dived into the novel, and I couldn't really stop. So I continued and postponed the question about how big it's or how huge it's going to be. I thought, okay, this question is something I have to deal with my publisher afterwards. And but it was interesting for me. I get it. It was a personal mission, maybe, because I had a lot of questions about my past, about my country, about, of course, future, because it's always like connected for me with the present, and the present is connected with the past, and so on. And I was not really aware of it was the context, because you cannot write about Georgian history without, from that period, about writing about the Soviet or Russian history. And the Russian history is like, of course, history, or the European history, the German history, and so on. So this is why this material I had to deal with becomes like, it was more and more and more. And then I was lucky, I had a scholarship from the Robert Bosch. And this is a scholarship for like journalists or writers for research, just doing research in Africa or Eastern countries. And I for 4 years. And the first 2 years I was just like, okay, writing and reading and doing some other jobs. But after the 2 years I had the scholarship, and I was just like, okay, I stopped anything else, and traveled a lot. The most material, the most documents I was researching or reading or checking being in Russia, and of course Georgia. And yes, the last 2 years I was concentrated on the novel and doing nothing else. And yes, went to archives, a lot of libraries. What was also really helpful, like journals and newspapers from and so on, because it helped a lot to understand how this propaganda was working. Yes, and the rest, it was a really huge and challenging and emotional journey, I guess, and I'm kind of thankful that I went through this, because I had no idea what I was really doing and where I would end up. And maybe it was good that I had no idea.
Yeah, writers often say that the story or the character takes them at one point and not the other way around. I would like to introduce at this point, Carrie. You can turn on your camera now so that our audience knows a little bit what we're talking about. We have a special guest here, Carrie Brianna Hart. Hello, Carrie. We can't hear you.
Hello.
Hello. So Carrie is a friend of mine and also an actor from Miami, actually. And she's probably one of the few people here in the audience that had already read The Eighth Life in English. I've read it in German, maybe some others, or in some other languages. Nino, in how many languages is The Eighth Life now translated? Do you know?
a lot of languages. I mean, it's a gift. And I mean, for some month ago, it's been published in Italy, but of course the English translation, it's really, really great because it's difficult for German books to be translated into English. And yes, I'm really, really lucky and feeling very happy about that. And a lot of countries, I don't know how many, but the funny thing is now now they're translating it into Russian, and that was something that I was not expected.
That'll be interesting. That'll be interesting. And Carrie is actually having a background of your title cover of Eighth Life here in America. Yeah. Carrie, what did you think? How did you like the book?
I loved the book. I thought it translated into English phenomenally. It is an enthralling story. I started reading it and immediately was reading it in the morning before I went to work, reading it with my coffee. As soon as I got home from work, I was diving back into the book again before I went to bed. I was reading the book, waking up, reviewing what I almost fell asleep reading the night before. It was very, very engaging. I loved it. I loved all the history, especially. I found myself learning about a different culture that I completely knew nothing about. And I thank you for writing the book, because it is a gift, as you said. It's a gift of history. It's a gift of family. It's a gift of a lot of things, a lot of lessons in the book, and especially the relationships between the different generations that are presented. It really was very, very enthralling.
Yeah, I can only recommend it as well.
Thank you so much.
And since Carrie is an actor as well, I asked her if she could read some excerpt from the book. So it's going to be in English, obviously. Everyone who speaks German, you buy the book in German. Everyone who doesn't speak German, you buy it in English, but buy it. You don't want to miss this. Or any other book by Nino, really. But the fantastic thing, and really in two meanings, in that novel is the trick, if you will, you used with the or really the symbol. It's really beautiful, just per se, is the role of hot chocolate in the family saga, and it tells us so much about your style, but also about the idea and how you created actually a very imaginative world there. And I asked Carrie to read two parts one about the introduction of the hot chocolate into the novel, and then something else about the chocolate. And I don't know, maybe we should both turn, we should both turn off our cameras, and then we can let Carrie read it by her own, and the audience can focus on her. After that, we're going to talk a little bit more about the novel, but then we're going to turn over to questions from the audience. And if you like, the audience, you can already start writing questions in the chat. Floor is yours, ma'am.
My great-great-grandfather gathered experiences from all over Europe. He toured some excellent patisseries in Western Europe, and yet, contrary to his employer's expectations, he decided to return to his homeland and start a business of his own. He had, and unfortunately, I am not in possession of any verifiable information about where exactly he developed his incomparable chocolate, discovered a magical secret formula, and had a recipe in his pocket that would revolutionize the taste of hot chocolate. At this point, the recipe, or rather the hot chocolate resulting from it, should be introduced as one of the principal characters in our story, Brilke. As unfortunately, I may not reveal the ingredients of the drink under no circumstances, no way, never, never, never. I have to find the words to describe the indescribable. And unfortunately, I also don't know whether my great-great-grandfather derived this recipe from somebody else or developed it himself. He guarded it like a secret of war. But one thing is certain. On his return home, he already had the guarantee for his future success in his pocket. At that point, nothing was known of the side effects of this magic chocolate. For now, it was a recipe for a simple Viennese style hot chocolate. This meant that the base was chocolate, not cocoa. First, the chocolate was manufactured. Then it was melted and mixed with other ingredients. But something in the mixture and the preparation made this chocolate special, unique, irresistible, startling. The very scent of it was so enticing and so intense that one couldn't help hurrying towards its source. The chocolate was thick, syrupy, and black as the night before a heavy storm. It was consumed in small portions, hot, but not too hot, in small cups, and ideally with silver spoons. The taste was incomparable. Savoring it was like a spiritual ecstasy, a supernatural experience. You melted into the sweet mass. You became one with this delicious discovery. You forgot the world around you and felt a unique sense of bliss. As soon as you tasted this chocolate, everything was exactly as it should be. My great-great-grandfather returned home from Budapest with this secret recipe in his pocket. He was proud of what he had achieved and believed it was possible to bring the gallantry and exquisite tastes of Paris or Vienna to the Georgian provinces and change the tastes of the people there. Following his return, he married a pupil from the Holy Mother of God convent school, a pious and taciturn woman named Ketevan, who had what one might call melancholic tendencies. She didn't care two figs for the Russian Empire and thought Russia's annexation of Georgia the most disastrous mistake in the whole of Georgian history. And all her life, she refused to speak Russian. He had fallen in love with her. It was not an arranged marriage, but unfortunately, it was not a happy one either. She espoused different views. She saw Russia as the origin of all evil, while my great-great-grandfather viewed Russia as an opportunity for Georgia and believed it was the Russians who had first given the Caucasus access to the world culture, combating the illiteracy among Georgia's population and the greed of its minor aristocracy. He was pro-Tsarist and enjoyed all the privileges of his collaborator lifestyle afforded. His wife, however, never tired of claiming that Georgia was nothing more than a colony and that the Slavic culture was the downfall of the Caucasian.
So that was the first excerpt, and what I find interesting, the chocolate, but it also shows the two poles, no, of hope and already realization, I find, that the new system, Soviet system, may not be the greatest one. I think that's in a few pages you have already, and made so much world history and made it sensual. I think that's really your big gift, if I may say. And then there's a second very short excerpt that we also wanted to read.
Looking for it. That night, Stasia took an oath, swearing to learn the recipe by heart and destroy the paper. And when she was lying in her bed again, recalling the taste with all her senses, she was sure that this secret recipe could heal wounds, avert catastrophes, and bring people happiness. But she was wrong.
Danke.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. It's exciting to hear it in English.
Yeah.
It's beautiful in English. It's beautiful, beautiful translation.
Yeah, I thought this, she was wrong. That's really then the book, right? Basically. And I invite really.
Fast in einen Satz, ja.
I really invite everyone to purchase it as a hardcover or as an ebook, your local bookstore or on Amazon or wherever. I want just, I think because of time, I would like to open the channel, if that's okay for you, Nino.
Yeah, super.
And we're going to have a question and answer. I know, for example, one person here, we heard him already shortly about the Golden Fleece, would like to share something about his a Georgian who has a different Georgian experience. But really everyone, if you can turn on your cameras again and let's hear your question. I think you can turn on the mics as well, and then we're gonna just see what's coming up. Scott, maybe you want to begin?
Oh, thanks, Michael. Thanks, Oliver. Pardon me. Sagamom Shvidobis Kalbatono Nino. Yeah, mem kviaskati, mevlaparakob kartulad, rusulad, germanulad, inglesurad.
I'm impressed.
Me too, actually.
So I wanted to ask, since you're from a country of strong women like Queen Tamar and Queen Nino and things like that, does that play into any of your characters?
I guess so. I mean, I was really the Eight Life was published, and since I live in Germany, that every time, in the reviews of that book, and it was something positive, of course, and I was happy about that, but people were always mentioning, oh, you're writing about strong women, strong women, strong women. And in the beginning, I thought, okay, it's nice. But afterwards, I realized when everyone is just like mentioning this strengths of women, it implicates that women normally are kind of weak or not strong. But I grew up with women like that. I mean, I grew up in a family with a lot of women and everyone was a fighter and struggling, and Georgia wouldn't have survived the 90s without women. Even nowadays, a lot of women are working abroad and sending money to the families and struggling and fighting and so on. So for me, it was kind of normal. And sometimes I'm wondering that even in Germany in the 29th century, it seems something really special to why strong women. So for me, maybe it's normal, and maybe it's good that it's normal, but reflecting and reading all the reviews, I'm realizing that it's still not normal elsewhere or in general. But of course, it's also a patriarchal country. It doesn't mean that we're completely like equal and everything is fine and there are no problems. But maybe I was kind of lucky enough to be surrounded by women like that. one thing that it's really Georgian, and every time I got mad hearing that when I was a kid, my grandma, and she was a really, really strong woman, and she raised my father on her own life, and she is the one who maybe introduced me to the world of literature, so I will be thankful to her till my forever. But one thing she was like keep repeating her life, it was like, okay, men are the head, or man is the head and women is the neck, so you can turn him the way you like. And every time I got mad, because I was just like, I don't want to be anybody's neck, I want to be my head, so just like leave me alone. But this is something, maybe this is the one sentence that represents like the Georgian female male, this politics of this gender structures or problems. So this is something funny, but every time when I had, yes. In Georgia, women are dealing with a lot of things, I think, this way. They're just doing like, okay, we're not so strong and we have problems, so can you help me? But in meanwhile, they're ruling everything. So this is the reality as I...
Migvars Kartveli Kalki. And you might see I've got a Georgian poster up here and a Georgian map of all of the monasteries up here, like Jivari and stuff like that on my wall.
Yes. How does it come that you're kind of connected to the Georgian culture?
How come that you're so connected to the Georgian culture?
Oh, because we're sister states or sister countries. Atlanta and Tbilisi are sister cities, and the two Georgias have been sister countries since Soviet days.
Mm. Since Soviet days.
Wow.
Yeah, so I first went there when you were a child, and without boring the rest of the audience here, I did want to mention quickly that in the ancient Georgian history, people used sheep's wool or fleece to catch tiny flecks of gold in the rivers, what's called placer gold mining. We did the same thing here in Georgia, in fact, this Georgia. And so the Greeks traveled there to find the legendary golden fleece, which was just how the people collected gold. And of course, they just wanted gold like every other great adventurer or traveler. Anyway, that's enough from me.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
They did that in this Georgia as well?
In English, you say golden fleece?
Yeah, it's off English, golden fleece.
Oh.
Yeah, and so here we had a gold rush here as well. The first gold rush in North America was here in what's now the state of Georgia. And we even have a city named Auraria, for example, which is that's Latin for gold.
Yeah, that's interesting. Any other comments or questions or something? Don't be shy. Auf Deutsch oder auf Englisch? I had a question that I forgot to ask, or maybe that in a lot of your works, there's it's like we already said, people live in two different cultures or something like that. That's one thing that is, I think, very modern again, no? Through migration and so on. And the other thing is, I wanted to ask you, since you wrote another novel, Die Katze und der General, The Cat and the General, about the Chechenian war and its implications. That leads me to the question: do you think this history, which is now really already again Soviet history, which is already now 30 years old again, does it still affect our societies in Europe, do you think? And not only directly now the former Soviet countries, but European countries, or maybe even America also in general. Is that something that affects us nowadays? Is that part of the reason why you write about it?
It's a part of my biography, of course, and it's a part of it had a huge impact on me and everything that happened afterwards. And yes, I do believe, even, as I mentioned, I moved 3 months ago, I moved to Berlin, and I was aware of how present the history is even there. It's an Eastern German district where I do live. And I mean, just like even the details, what is offered in, you compare it to just like a Western district or Hamburg, it's completely different. Of course, this is a small detail, but still. And in Eastern Europe, of course, everything that is happening now, and we're keeping repeating the history for the last 30 years, it's a kind of circle. And we're not able to break through somehow. Of course, things are still changing and still progressing and so on. Of course, pessimistic, but a lot of problems and a lot of things, and not only in Eastern Europe. I mean, I was really shocked how big is the impact of this story and this East-West thing, even in Berlin of nowadays. I was not really aware of it, and I think it's not bad to be. It's always about how you deal with that, because history is, of course, also really helpful for present, and you can solve problems, present problems, only by knowing the past. And even some questions that you have maybe, or you might have about the future, is also kind of connected to the past. But it's always about how you deal with that. And Georgia and a lot of former countries didn't have maybe not the chance or not the possibility to have this kind of analyze. I don't know, this Aufarbeitung. I love this German word, and in Georgian we don't even have that, because it's maybe they were forced to do so, but I think it's helpful. And I mean, if you look at Russia, for example, a lot of things they keep repeating, only in a lightly transformed something new, but it's kind of das ist einfach it's a line from the past that continues till nowadays. And yes, I think so, yeah.
I sometimes think even in America, I mean, America was the other side of the Cold War, so to speak, and I think it's also still affected by it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder if some of the decisions that were made here in America led subconsciously to the polarization that is currently existing in America, even more than in Germany, through decisions on education and through decisions on propaganda in the end about what America is and not is and stuff like that. I'm not sure, but it seems to me sometimes like that. That's also why I recommend this book, but really not only that book of yours to Americans, because it makes the history a bit fuller, and it touches your heart as well. Ja. Irgendwelche anderen Fragen noch? Haben wir keine Fragen?
Doch.
Keine Fragen?
Doch.
Ja, Karl.
Mich würden eigentlich Ihre literarischen Modelle ein wenig interessieren, denn das achte Leben ist ziemlich einzigartig als Roman, Familienroman, sehr lange natürlich, sehr politisch eigentlich auch. Sie haben das so beschrieben, als ob das Ihnen eher überkommen ist, das Geschehen ist, der Schreibprozess. Aber hatten Sie da auch bestimmte Modelle vor Augen? Und dann als zweite Frage, ich weiß, dass Sie zum Beispiel ein Nachwort zum Roman Ali und Nino geschrieben haben, von Qurban Said, was auch sehr politisch ist Es geht da auch sehr um Kulturunterschiede. Hatten Sie so etwas vor Augen oder gehe ich da ganz falsch?
I translate that quickly. So the question is about were there some models or some
literary models.
Literary models.
And
exactly.
The second part of the question is Kurban Said's Ali and Nino, which is a text I really like, and I know you wrote an afterword for that. Is that the text that was important to you?
I was raised with, I was influenced. I had a grandmother, as I already mentioned. She was a really huge fan of literature, but especially the Russian one. So it was the biggest impact, I guess, as a child or even as a teenager, had Russian literature like Dostoevsky or Bulgakov, but also Russian poems. Like I'm a huge fan of Marina Tsvetaeva. It's a Russian, she's a female poet, and wrote a lot of great lyrics. But of course, I love like ancient Greek. Not only like plays, but I loved as a child, and still I do love the Greek mythology. But I'm also a huge fan, for example, of Philip Roth or Arundhati Roy. I'm reading a lot of books, and I cannot even say that I have the one favorite writer, because it always changed on my mood, and I'm reading a lot of also female writers and like the European ones. The last one I'm reading, she's from Nigeria, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She's migration and about Africa and about, yes, a lot of really political and social and actual stuff, I guess. And I really loved to discover like this different point of view, because it's a completely, most of the times you have this Western or this European or American point of view, and really, as you're saying, zentristische Perspektive. And so I'm always like discovering a lot of, and I cannot say that I have one favorite writer, because it always changes. It depends also where you stand in your biography, what you're looking for, what you're experiencing. And this is what I really love about literature. Even when you read book with 15 and you read it with 30 or 40, it's completely something different, because you changed as a person, you're more, and you're standing somewhere else in your life. So yes, but of course I have some writers that I'm keeping returning often. But I think the biggest impact but also German literature. I mean, I was also influenced by that. So I cannot, I think it changed a lot, but I'm also interested in the present writers. So I'm reading a lot of new books.
And the Ali and Nino? Was that important to you, or?
Ali and Nino. Ali and Nino, I read that book when I was 17 or 18, and I fell in love with the story. And it's a really interesting, it's kind of myth, because you don't really know a lot of things about the author, this Kurban Said. It's a pseudonym, so you don't know who he is or who he's been. There are some theories, but there is also theory that it was written by a woman and so on. So there are a lot of legends about it. And I fell in love with this really romantic and beautiful love story. and this Caucasus thing and this Azerbaijan, Armenian, Georgian stuff. And somehow it's also, of course, about politics and about this beginning of the century. And in Georgia, you even have the Black Sea, the statue.
Yeah.
Because it became really popular in the last 20 years. This book being like rediscovered in the 90s, I guess, or the beginning of 2000. And it's been, it was written in German. Yeah. It's also a little bit funny. And I loved that book, and I enjoy it as the publishing house asked me to write this. How's the English word for that? Nachwort.
Afterward, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I was quite sentimental and melancholic because I read it like 20 years after, and still I really enjoyed the book. And I think this is a good opportunity for interesting in that region. This is good for like. Maybe it's a good approach to that culture, and not only Georgia, because this mixture is what it would. And I like the humor. I think this is a kind of funny book also.
Yeah, I teach the text quite a lot and have always very good results with students. They really enjoy it, although they know very little about the area and so on. But it's an interesting text.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kannst du den Namen in den Chat schreiben, vielleicht?
Sure.
Danke. Ich sage einfach Karl. Ich bin schon zu amerikanisiert. Ich nenne alle nur noch mit Vornamen. Okay. Thank you for that comment. That's interesting. Yeah. If there are no more comments or questions, I would like to wish you, I hope you had a good time, and I would like to wish you a very happy holidays, really. And if you don't know what to read over the holidays, now you do know. It's called The Eighth Life by someone, I don't know, someone Nino Haratischvili, I heard. You can also buy many other books of hers in German. It's recommended. And shop local if you can. Okay, thank you very much. Vielen Dank alle. Und vielen Dank noch einmal speziell natürlich an Carrie und natürlich an Nino, dass ihr dabei wart. Und that was Georgia to Georgia, and we even have Tbilisi. Yeah. Und Hamburg, Atlanta, es ist alles dabei, es ist wirklich fantastisch. Okay, vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. Vielen Dank für die Einladung und fürs dabei sein.
Wunderbar, sehr schön.
Schönen Start ins neue Jahr.
Ja, vielleicht sehen wir mal ein Stück von dir hier in Atlanta, wer weiß. Ich weiß, one of your pieces at least was already in Canada, so I know that. So maybe we get it to America, right? To the USA.
Oh,
okay.
That would be great.
Yeah, we should work on that. Thank you very much. Vielen Dank. Happy Holidays, Nino und Carrie. Vielleicht wartet ihr noch einmal, bleibt noch kurz dran und dann tschüss.
Tschüss. Vielen Dank.
Gwille Priestvist. Nakvam dis.
I'm impressed, Scott. I'm really impressed.
Hallo, ja, ich habe nur ausgeschaltet, aber ja, nochmal vielen Dank.
Ja, warte, ich sehe